So, where did this idea of evolution come from? Well, there are always ideas. You can go back to Aristotle and find elements of evolutionary thought in Aristotle. But really, it's a 19th century idea. And in order to see how it developed, let's go back to about 1790 or 1800. So at the end of the century of the Enlightenment. At that point, if you were to ask a well-educated person living in a Western culture how old the world is, they would say, oh, thousands of years. And if you were to ask them, well, where did all these species on the planet come from? They would say they were all created just the way they look now, and they've never changed. And if you ask them, have there ever been any species that went extinct? They would say no. Everything that was created is still alive and can be found somewhere on the planet. So when Alexander von Humboldt, who was certainly a creature of the Enlightenment, sets out to explore South
Let's make one point very clear at the outset. Oftentimes, I get student papers that refer to Beethoven's Fifth Song or Tchaikovsky's First Piano Song. Is that right? No, that's not good at all. Are these songs? What do you have to make something a song? Lyrics. You got to have a text. So we don't have, in 80% of classical music, we don't have lyrics. We don't have a text. Well, yes, with opera, of course, but the other 80% is purely instrumental music. It works its magic, again, through purely instrumental means. So we can't really call those songs. And this puzzled me. But one day, I was sitting there at iTunes, and I wanted to buy an interior movement of a Mozart serenade. So I was all set to purchase this, and it said, buy song. Boom. That told me the answer. That's where this terminology comes into play. Because on iTunes,
Dr. Tony Wagner believes there are 7 skills that young people need to have in order for them to find and keep a good job in today's economy. But he thinks our schools are focusing too much on tests and academic performance and aren't doing enough to teach those skills. Let me give you an example. One of Wagner's 7 skills is the ability to work in an international team. This is because little teamwork is carried out in one building anymore. When most global companies have a problem, they create teams of people from all over the world to solve it. And these people meet online, in virtual meeting rooms. To succeed in this kind of environment, you need to be a good communicator and understand different cultures. Teams also need good leaders who lead by influencing others, but Wagner and the business people he interviewed say that young people today are unprepared for teamwork and leadership. Because of this, Wagner thinks that people involved in teaching and learning must rethink the way that they educate people in schools so that these young people have the skills they need to achieve a successful career in the 21st century.
Well, employers are currently experiencing a love-hate relationship with social media. Some are using it to their advantage. They're reaching more customers, increasing sales, and improving their brand image through social networking sites. They're also using them for recruitment. On the other hand, many employers continue to see the bad side of social media and believe that it poses a threat to their business. Negative comments online can damage a brand, and employers also worry that employees might spend too much time online during working hours, stopping them from working effectively and completing all their tasks. But this problem provides employers with an opportunity. Employees who spend a lot of time on social networking sites do it because they're bored. They don't feel challenged and want to fill their time. This suggests that employers should take a more active role in providing development opportunities for their staff and setting new goals. This way, they can benefit from the advantages of social media without experiencing the difficulties.
It seems as though people are starting to suffer from global warming fatigue. In other words, they're tired of hearing about how our climate's changing for the worse and how we're destroying the planet with pollution. People do care, but there's a lot of talk, little action, and certainly no solution yet. The stories people see in newspapers focus on the negative. They talk about how politicians are choosing the economy over the environment, especially in these difficult economic times, and they write about people whose lives have been negatively affected by extreme climate change. Why should we spend our free time reading articles that make us feel depressed and probably quite helpless? Global warming campaigners must turn the sad stories into happy ones. They should talk about the actions that are having a positive effect on climate change, so that people become interested again and feel motivated to continue taking action.
We all know that journalists often make things sound worse than they are, but they aren't the only ones. It seems that scientists sometimes do it too. In the past, scientists have claimed that the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, that's the area in the Pacific Ocean where plastic waste has collected together to create one kind of big garbage island. Anyway, they have claimed that this area of garbage is twice the size of the state of Texas, or 20 times the size of England. Some scientists even said that there's more plastic in that ocean than plankton. That's the tiny animals and plants that fish eat. But a new report shows that while there is a very serious problem for the environment, it's not as great as many scientists have said. The research showed that the garbage covers an area that's much smaller than Texas. And while plastic can harm some sea life, it actually feeds other tiny living creatures. For this reason, the report concludes that we shouldn't try to remove the plastic, but should focus on stopping more garbage from entering the ocean so it doesn't get worse in the future.
It's easy to think that humans are the only species that have true friendships, but animals make friends too. What do we know about these friendships?
Well, we thought for a long time that animals only have friends for biological reasons, so their genes will continue. After all, it's easier for animals to survive with the help of another animal. We thought that animals only helped each other to get help in return. But there's growing evidence that tells us this isn't true. Animals can also be generous and give up something important for a friend without expecting anything back from them, just like humans.
And what about friendships between animals from different species?
Like the bird that looked after the cat, you mean? Those friendships are very interesting. We actually know very little about them at the moment, but we're starting to look at them more closely.
I've been looking at ocean biodiversity. That's the diversity of species that live in the world's oceans. Biologists still don't know how serious the threat to their survival is for each individual species. So a body called the Global Marine Species Assessment is now creating a list of endangered species on land. So they consider things like the size of the population, how many members of one species there are in a particular place, and then they look at their distribution in geographical terms, although this is quite difficult when you're looking at fish because they're so mobile. And then thirdly, they calculate the rate at which the decline of the species is happening. So far, only 1,500 species have been assessed, but they want to increase this figure to 20,000. For each one they assess, they use the data they collect on that species to produce a map. Now, let's consider two types of mistakes that can occur when a manager actually starts to set up a duplicate system to replicate a successful process. Firstly, perhaps he forgets that he was just trying to copy another process and starts trying to improve on it. Another mistake is trying to use the best parts of various different systems in the hope of creating the perfect combination. Unfortunately, attempts like these usually turn out to be misguided and lead to problems. Why? Well, for various reasons. Perhaps there weren't really any advantages after all, because the information was inaccurate. Or perhaps the business settings weren't really comparable. More typically, the advantages are real enough, but there are also disadvantages that have been overlooked. For example, modification might compromise safety in some way. So what's the solution? Well, I don't intend to suggest that it's easy to get things right the second time. It's not. But the underlying problem has more to do with attitudes than the actual difficulty of the task. And there are ways of getting it right. These involve adjusting attitudes, being more realistic and cautious, really. As an immigrant to North America, you will need to ensure that employers and organizations such as colleges and universities properly recognize your international credentials. These may be trade certificates, but also educational qualifications such as degrees or diplomas that you have completed or partially completed. It is common for hiring personnel to have little or no training in evaluating an academic background earned outside of North America. But at the same time, employers see formal education as very important